Listeners, you are in for such a treat today. I have Lina AbiRafeh here. She is a memoir writer and she is in the trenches with the whole agent search and pitching. You are going to love her stories today. We just organically just start chatting, and Lena was like, hit the record button, girl, let's get started. So that's the kind of vibe we're in for today for this conversation. So let's just kick it off to Lena. If you want to tell us a little bit about your memoir now, or we can cover that later, or if you want to just jump into where you're at, what's going on, let's hear it.
Well, for anyone who wants to write a memoir, like myself, I guess you've got to believe that you have a story to tell. And there's a certain amount of, I don't know, soul searching that came with like, am I as interesting as I think I am? And I think, I still ask myself that question every day. Like, I maybe think I'm interesting, but do other people think so? So, like, overcoming that challenge and wanting to write a memoir after having lived what I'd like to think is an interesting life in humanitarian aid, working on sexual violence, living all over the world, living and working in war zones and natural disasters. I mean, maybe there's somebody who wants to hear about that. And I ask myself these questions every single day. Like there's never a day where I have a consistency of feeling and approach. It's my relationship to memoir writing is very volatile. We're volatile bedfellows, let's just say.
Which is a great way to phrase it because the theme for today is going to be about how the dating world mirrors this like hunt for the right agent and picking and all of the pitfalls of the people pleasing or the things that we get stuck in the online dating of like putting your best foot forward but someone wants to change you too much and you lose a part of yourself. So, in what ways have you experienced that within this whole agent search?
Well, when I started the process, which was a couple of years ago, I really wanted to do it, like deeply wanted to do it. And sometimes when you want something so badly, like you approach it with a level of anxiety and, an insecurity, just overall angst that probably isn't the like, I got this, I'm confident, I know what I bring to the table, I'm great. I didn't bring any of that mojo. I brought the like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Am I interesting? Are these words good? Like my vocabulary, I'm looking at the thesaurus. Can I say something other than she said all the time? Like all of these feelings that I had to deal with that maybe led to some levels of insecurity. Like I've actually written 3 books before, but they're academic books. And so they're a little bit
Mm.
different, boring. I mean, they're niche. Let's call them niche. So the idea behind writing something that was like raw and real and gritty and, memoir and like squishy and exposy, like tearing everything apart, like vomiting all your guts and stuff on the screen. I was like, oh God, like every time I wrote something, I would cringe, look away. So when I started to look for agents, I was like, I don't care. I just want to be chosen. It's just
Mm.
like swiping right on whatever and like hoping something sticks, like, oh my God, someone picked me. Doesn't matter if they're the right person, it's just like a warm body, right? It's a little bit like that's a little bit how I felt
Yeah.
when I went through the process the first time, because there have been rounds of this and we like to learn things the hard way. So I queried 30 agents, got rejected by 28, meaning accepted by 2, and then I kind of picked the senior most one, or the one I thought was the most senior, without really thinking like, should I cast a wider net? Is this person right for
Mm.
me? Do they have the same vision? Are they going to be a champion for the book? Do they really see me, love me, parallel to my dating life? Totally. Right? Let's
Yeah, that's like
let's
picking
not
the guy that's like good on paper, the one that like logically makes sense, like the best career, the highest salary, the most stable,
really.
path or future versus like what's right for me, where am I at? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and I was approaching, and this was 2019, 2020. I was approaching both my dating life and my memoir writing life with the perception of scarcity. Like,
Mhm.
this is a very competitive space. I am not competitive in this space. I have to do whatever it takes, and whoever picks me, that means I have been chosen, and I better go with that, and I better love it, and I better suspend my judgments, my critical
Mm.
thinking, my gut reactions. Doesn't matter. Just go with this. And that's a little bit what I did initially, where I was like, okay, I believe that this person knows what they're talking about more than I know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And they're going to bring this book to life, and I don't care how that happens, but it has to happen. So there was that desperation as well of like, I mean, the truth is, and I think most memoir writers would say the same, like it was a decade in the making in my mind, in the
Mm.
things I would write, like journal entries or newsletter like things to friends and family, or short stories that nobody would ever, I was always writing stuff, in part because I felt like what I was living and seeing and experiencing was for me so remarkable that I just, and maybe because I'm a storyteller and because I'm a talker, surprise, that I thought it, I had to like, and to compensate for a goldfish style memory. Like I have a terrible memory. So I was always
Mhm.
afraid that these stories were just going to slip right through my
Mhm.
fingers. So quick, put them down. And I've forgotten, I'm sure I've forgotten the best things. But so with that in mind, I felt like, well, I'd already been at this for a decade. So I just, now I'm exhausted, even though I had just started. So,
Mhm.
wrote this, so queried agents, picked the senior most agent, and did not realize at the time that she had the bit of a different vision for the book.
Mhm.
Um, this was a great learning experience, where I definitely got a lot out of it, in the sense that I became much more clear on what my story was and what I was saying, in large part because I saw it going in a direction that I lost track of. I felt like, wait a minute, that's not my story right now. That feels a little bit different. We dissected my entire book proposal for a period of 18 months, which is
Mhm.
a lot of rewrites, a lot of tearing things apart, and a lot of putting them back together in ways that, again, I was like, is this still my story? I don't know how I feel about it. I lost a little bit of love for it. It's like, I say in relationships too, this idea of like, you fall in love with the person that makes you feel like your best self.
Mhm.
Ultimately, like they're this mirror that's holding up to you to reflect back all that is awesome, wonderful, and lovable about you. Like I
Mhm.
wanted the same from my agent. This idea of like, you're awesome. This is like your supreme self. We're going to get to like together. We are creating this because I see this person in you. And so I was like, okay, I'm not feeling like my best self. I'm feeling like I just want to get this published no matter what. So when we finally had something after this 18-month excruciating process, she took it out, shopped it around to publishers, about 40 publishers, all the big ones, and they all came back and said no. Now,
Mhm.
they came back with nice no's. I was told, as far as industry standards go, that these were really kind rejections. Like, kind rejection is still a rejection. It doesn't matter what adjective you put right before it, it's still a rejection. But I didn't feel bad about it. Like, normally I would just collapse in a heap. But because I wanted this so badly, and I was going to grieve what I thought was the death of the dream so dramatically. It was almost, it could have been like an Oscar winning performance, but I did not do that, because I thought, well, okay, this hurts a little, but they're right. Like, the storyline wasn't strong, the arc wasn't that, yes, they were
Mhm.
absolutely right. So I went through about 2 days feeling sorry for myself. And then on the third day, scraped up the bits and pieces that were all over the floor and said, okay, like, let's just think about this for a second. And I did what I also have done in my dating life now, which is like, pull back and sit with it, and like, and be alone, and be clear on who I am, what I want, and in the case of this memoir, what I'm saying, so I can reclaim my story. And then, if and when I decide to go out into the world again, the dating world, the publishing world, let it be with clarity. So I know, so I'm not just like throwing spaghetti against the wall, like I said, and taking whatever lands, but that I am
Mhm.
deliberate about the choices that I make. Because I also just don't feel like I'm going to keep doing this forever. I don't want to waste my time. And I want something that I am really going to be proud of. Because at the end of the day, if I don't feel good about it, if my head doesn't hit the pillow thinking, wow, I'm so excited about this story, and other
Mhm.
people are as well, then that's,
Mhm.
I don't want to feel that way. So, in a nutshell, that is where I'm at. I can go on, but do you want me to take a breath and pause? Should I keep going? Like get to the
The
rest of
thing
the
I
story?
wanted to say or add or have you talk about is that fact that like you stuck with that agent for the 18 months, which I think, yes, we can relate to the dating world where it's like you get invested in a relationship, you get through some of the early hurdles and things, and then you feel like, oh, I'm kind of stuck here, where I've already spent so much of my time to start over now at this point, at this age, etc. Is that really in my best interest? So what was that decision point like for you when you ultimately decided to step away from that agent relationship?
Well, I mean, we inevitably broke up, so to speak, because after 40 rejections, there was nowhere else to go. And I was relieved. I mean, I learned a lot, to her credit. Like, she worked me hard enough that I feel like I became a better writer. I'm a stronger writer. I was more clear on the story. I learned a lot about the show don't tell stuff. So I definitely I felt like it was a workout and I gained some muscle mass, and that for me was important. But also the idea that, in with agents and with relationships, because that is an intimate relationship in many many ways, because they are getting
Mhm.
inside your head. There is like that opportunity cost, like you've invested so much, as you said, and all of a sudden, is it, comfort, and are you just lazy, or is it love? Like, do you know the difference because you've gone through all these like awkward first milestones together, and now you know each other, and are you willing, and as somebody who is older, in the publishing market, in the dating market, right? I'm turning 50 this year. That's 50. I know, just
Amazing.
yeah, crazy, right? So, I feel like, wait a minute, I don't have time, right? All of a sudden, you get this sense of like the clock is ticking. So, so yeah, it was definitely this like I've come so far and invested so much. But what I did that was interesting, to take it forward, is after I grieved for my 2 days, picked myself up on the third day, pull back, sat around with it, started reading other people's stuff, and also just like reconnecting with my story, and thinking like, why am I doing this, and am I doing this for the right reasons? Like, am I writing this because I feel like it needs to be shared and people are going to love it and learn from it and whatever, or am I just, do I want to just say that, like, why am I doing this? So it had to really reconnect with that. And then one day, one very interesting day, it was March of last year, over 2 years ago. I don't know. Maybe it was 2 years. I can't remember when it was. Anyway, I was thinking about a story that happened to me when I was in Haiti. So in Haiti, I was working on sexual violence in the aftermath of the earthquake. And you don't do that kind of work without being fundamentally impacted by it. And I remembered a story that happened to me, and I decided to blog about it because I also in that time started a blog just to like get the words out, and to write little blips that are bite sized and manageable, but to keep writing, to keep like working that muscle that I had built. So I just in 30 minutes wrote out this story in a way that was really sort of gritty and not polished. And I was like, oh God, this is awkward, but I'm just going to publish it. It was like the least put together piece I'd ever written, and it took me no time at all, and I hit publish, and I cringed, and I looked away. And the response I got for that story, I don't have a million people following me by any stretch, but the response for that was so overwhelming, like, oh my God, please write like that more often. And I thought, oh wait a minute, like maybe it's that, maybe it was that like gritty element that was missing, and I needed to just like go back into those uncomfortable stories. And so then I sat down and I said, okay, if that's the story, well, what happens next, and what happens next, and what happens next? And what that led to was 2 months and 140,000 words, which is, writers know what that feels like, but other normal humans, that's a lot of words for you people out there. 140,000 words, just vomit
Oof.
in 2 months. I ended up with like carpal tunnel and arthritis and all kinds of hand problems. I was like, and yeah, and that's how the story came back to me. I had to just
Mm.
step away from my story to let it sort of come up when it wanted. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And what was funny was that when I did the 140,000 word vomit, I zoomed out and I was like, I see the structure here. And that is because, and I don't know if this works for other people, but for me, what I had been doing in my kind of pulling away from my story was trying to learn about structure and arc and save the cat and whatever other things. And that was almost, it was interesting, but it was also paralyzing for me because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, is this the hero's journey? Or is this like, am I the hero? Like, what is this? What structure am I fitting into? So reading all about that stuff, but also getting kind of overwhelmed and a little bit paralyzed by it. So then I said, okay, just hang on, just write because you love to write and see where that leads you. And that's what led to that gritty blog, which then led to the 140,000 words. And when I looked at it from like 30,000 feet, I was like, the structure is here. The arc is here. Like I somehow must have internalized all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff where I was like, that's so like what dark night of the soul, like I don't know, whatever stuff. Just
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was trying to squeeze myself into a pair of pants that no longer fits, let's just say, to give an example that I don't know anything about, of course. You know what I mean? Like that idea of like I was trying too hard, but somehow I had absorbed that anyway. And so when I did it and I saw the structure, I was like, ta da, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so
Yes.
I've been refining it ever since. And now I'm taking it out again into the world, and I want to see what, I want it to come to life. And I feel like now it will in a way that feels more honest. It feels more
Mm-hmm.
me. And I think that is really important, the reclaiming of my voice in the story. I mean, it's my story anyway. It has to feel like it's my voice. Otherwise, that's just somebody else talking about me. Um, and that's really, really interesting. And I'm doing the same in my dating life.
Oh,
Because
fun.
yeah.
I think what you really hit on is that you got to a place of like just authenticity, right? Of just putting yourself out there without the editing, without the tweaking, the 30 minutes of writing, just the raw, gritty emotions, removing the polishing, not worrying about all of that, and just putting that raw form out there. And you saw how well that was received. And, since we're equating all of this to dating, it takes me back to like, over a decade ago where I put up a dating profile and I made a point to like just put all the weird things about myself. Like I talked about how I snort when I laugh, and I just put it out there because I'm like, well, if they aren't like into me, like it's going to be a waste of time, right? And I think that's what you ultimately tapped into is finding out, taking that time solo,
Yeah.
to figure out what is my message, what is my voice, who am I, and how do I want this to help the world? How in what ways do I want to show up and reveal these stories, and what impact do I think they will have on other people? What impact do I want to have on other people? And then you got that positive feedback of people being like, yes, more of this. And you had the courage to then lean into that, to then regurgitate those 140,000 words, which, listener, if you have not done like a writing spree like that is so much writing, okay? Like that is a significant, that's two like NaNoWriMo months back to back, like that is just nonstop. And so now you can be so proud of the story that you have. I also love your reference to like the save the cat beats and everything because I've gone through a similar iteration with my memoir. The story is shifted, and I recognized that I had too much like setup. Like I was taking too long to get to the catalyst of the story and then get to the growth portion of the story. And I did use the save the cat beats to help me sort of recalibrate where my story needed to actually start. I was starting it way too like back in the future, back in the past, and so it was taking too long to get through. But I think there is some wisdom to the fact that even though at the time you couldn't see how your story overlaid, and real life does not overlay beautifully onto these heroes' journeys or the save the cat beats for, fictional screenwriting. Like it's not always, this goes with this, right? But because you had that awareness, you could then recognize later once you wrote out this 140,000 words, like, oh, that was a dark night of the soul, or this was a major turning point. Maybe that's my midpoint, or oh, this felt like a catalyst. And even if you can identify those really key beats, those key moments, then the rest of the, like, whether you do the fun and games for this many scenes or set up for this many scenes or, debate for this many scenes, that's a little bit more like arbitrary, right? But like, if we can really hit on the character arc and the growth that happens over the course of the story, which Hero's Journey and Save the Cat are really good at emphasizing, then that's the value, right? And that you were able to then recognize those moments, not forcing those moments.
Hmm. I think that's, the recognition and not forcing is such an important point, because I realize that in this whole journey that I'm on, that idea of like, you want something so badly, you want it to fit, you want it to work, you want it to be, you want an agent, you want a publisher, you want the greatest book deal ever, you want, bestseller, you want, but like how to hold space for like what I want without also desperately, urgently wanting it at all costs. And
Mm,
I think that tension, it's a balance I'm still learning, and sometimes I teeter one way and the other. But that idea of, again, not to like flog this, but it is, my dating life is the same. Would I like a partner? Yeah. Am I desperate for one? No, not at
mm,
all. Like, is it a partner no matter who, just like a human form? No, 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 no. I mean, the more I'm able to hold this space of like, I'm open, this is what I want, but I'm not going to die if I don't have it. And I would rather have the something that is really true to me, or nothing at all. Right. And
mm,
I think that's also become very true for the book. This idea of, if someone is going to pick it up, tear it apart, and like have me restructure it in a very different way, I'll decline. I'll be better able this time around to say, this isn't feeling right. Like, and maybe that means, having the courage, if it comes down to it, to go at it on my own in a like
mm.
self-publishing or hybrid or whatever sort of way, which really, as I'm learning, is the only way to have 100% control over your story, right?
Sure.
Your story, your title, your cover, your whatever, the rights to it. I don't know. I mean, it's a really complicated thing. And the idea of having to do it all alone is scary enough that, for somebody like me, I think, oh my God, I want a publisher because I want someone to hold my hand and do it for
Mm,
me or tell me how to do it. But maybe it's not worth selling off the story for. It's not worth
mhm,
selling your soul for. And I think that's true. I realize that as I get older in this process, as I
mhm,
mature as a writer, that idea that yes, I can still want it and work hard for it without, it just takes that edge off, that desperation, that like that hunger that on the one hand is normal, healthy in some ways, like keeps you going, builds drive, but also leads to some like bad food choices.
Yeah, it's knowing what your
Switch.
deal breakers are, right? Like, to what extent are you willing to, say, move for the right person or entertain the idea of a family, or maybe that person already has kids. Are you open to that? Are you not open to that? And then figuring out what those
Mhm.
are for you as an individual, just like you as a writer are figuring out, like, I'm not okay with you largely changing my story structure. If you don't like
Mhm.
this character arc, then it's just not for you. And I will take this and I will do my own thing with it. And I think that's
Exactly.
really good that you've come to terms with that. Are
And I,
you
I
at the
now believe
point?
in casting a wide net and
Mhm.
going on a million first dates. And that's, romantic and writing, both. I will entertain anybody for an hour. Want to hear what you have to say. I'm sure I can learn a lot. It's never time wasted, but whoever, I'm very selective about who gets a second hour.
What qualities, what things do people need to tell you in order to get a second hour? What are you looking for now?
I'm looking, actually, I'm looking inward. I'm looking to listen to my gut
Mm,
more, right? Because
mhm,
I know, and I knew it from the beginning, and I've known it in so many settings, but I did not listen because I was like, oh my God, I've been chosen. And the
mhm,
joy and the overwhelm and the feeling of like validation for being chosen overwhelmed my instincts. And I will not let, and now I think like, oh, cool. Well, I'm glad you like it, but like I need to like it too. So I need to kind of listen, and I can tell I'm listening to the gut. I get off the phone, or whatever it is, and just think about it, and think like, it does this person bring to the table what I really need, that is going to be enriching, and that is going to be the right direction for me. And I think it's sometimes takes a little bit of distance, a lot of reflection. That I tend to move very fast. Like, I want to move fast because I'm so excited
Mhm.
about this book, that I want to be like, oh my god, okay, great. Like, yep, you and me, this is a great match. Let's get the proposal out. When can we submit to publisher? When's the publisher going to get back? Right? I want to see all this happen, but I also have to forcibly slow myself down.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of that is just speaks to the lengthy process that I think writers underestimate, like how long this agent query process is, and then the edits you'll do with the agent, and then preparing the book proposal, and then sending it to publishers, and then waiting for publishers to get back to you. And then, I mean, the time it takes from like feeling like your book is ready to actually having it appear on a shelf somewhere is years. And I know you specifically can speak to this, from your own personal experience. I mean, you're still, what, probably 2 years out, even if you pick one of these agents that you're currently talking with now, and then they take it to publishers. Like, there's still time, and you've already invested over a decade of your time, like you said, like working on this and wanting to bring this vision to life, put the pen to paper on this.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to be proud of it.
Mhm.
I want to slow myself down so I can get to the finish line.
Mhm.
In the, like, marathon not a sprint kind
Yes.
of philosophy, that idea of like, this is a long and painful process. And I think, a lot of it is coming to terms with your own feelings around it. Like, are those 40 publisher rejections, gasp, are they
Mhm.
rejections of me, of my story, of the work I've done for decades? No, they are not at all. I mean, and being really rational about that, how we approach, and I tell you this as I tell myself this as a reminder, because that does not, undermine or negate all the work that I did with all these women around the world over decades. No, it does not mean that. It means a million other things, and some things I'll never know what publishers want, or what they prioritize, or what kind of day they had, or what was in their coffee on the day they read the proposal. Like,
Yeah.
these things can be a little bit arbitrary. Some
Yes.
people have been given lucky breaks, other people, try forever and never get it. I want to think of this stuff as character building.
Mhm.
Groan, rolls eyes back. I mean, that idea of like, okay, a bunch of people said no. Do you still want it? Yes, you do. All right. What are you going
Mhm.
to do now? Oh, more people said no. Oh, someone just tried to hijack that story. Wait, you still want it? Okay. Well, now what? So I have to ask myself over and over again, do I still want it? It's like I'm renewing my vows.
Love that.
I know, I'm just a master of metaphor. Like, do I still like you? Or am I just used to you? Right? All because, like, we know each other's quirky habits. Like, is that good enough?
Yeah.
I think that's the question. And that's,
Mhm.
for me, is a really interesting place to be with this, because now when I write, if I'm blogging, or if I'm, going back and tinkering with the book, while I'm waiting to figure out the whole agent, publisher, or whatever pathway that I seem to be embarking on again, I want to, I want to be proud of it. I want to feel
Mhm.
like that sounds like me, and I want to be excited when I read it. And that's what I want to hold space for.
Absolutely. The thing we always have to remind ourselves is like with the agents as well as the publishers, they're looking at this as a business, right? They're saying if I invest X amount as an advance in this author, am I going to be able to recoup my costs, or how much my costs am I going to be able to recoup? And most of the time they know they actually aren't going to recoup their costs on that book. They're looking across their whole like product line, right? And
Hmm.
so it's a business decision. It's not about you as the writer. It's not even about the like quality of your story. It's about what will sell, how much space does it take up on the shelf. That's why, especially the fiction writers have to be really mindful of their word count.
Yep.
The big fantasy writers that want to write the big, J.R. Tolkien level like books, but they are looking at, how much they fit two books on the shelf where, yours is only going to be one book. It's all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's so much bigger than the value of the story, the quality of the writing. So yeah, sometimes it does mean that we as the writer are our best advocate for our own stories, and we may choose to go a self-published route or a hybrid indie route, small press.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, don't let that ever reflect on, internalize that as, oh, my story's not good enough or my writing's not high enough quality. The example you see all the time is 50 Shades of Grey as far as like writing quality. So many of the reviews are about like, oh, it's horrible writing, but I couldn't put it down because the story is there, and there's so much of that, and it's just something that people wanted, but they didn't know that at the time. I mean, even the publishers didn't know that was going to go so like be so hot at the time, right?
Exactly. I mean, what one thing I learned, you bring up the idea of the shelf and how much space it takes. One of the reasons that was a common thread through my kind rejections was we don't know what shelf it belongs on. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was really interesting because they were like, well, is it a memoir? Is it an exposition? Is it women's studies? Is it this? Is that? And at first I was like, oh my God, it's got to fit on a shelf. It's got to fit on one shelf. And now I feel like, well, it is all of those things and it needs to be all of those things. And we just need a different shelf. We just need to build a different shelf. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Put it
feel
on all
that
the
way.
shelves.
Right, put on all of them because to have to squeeze into something that is deliberately kind of rigid and unfortunately too narrow for what I'm trying to do is unfortunate. Put it on whatever it fits on all of them, and isn't that beautiful? And again, the same thing, I find with like how we are as people, like we are multidimensional people who, in a dating scenario, for instance, can be like fun and outdoorsy and sporty, but also like nerdy and whatever and whatever. Like,
Mhm.
can't we be all those things? Why do I have to be one thing? And I think, the journey to publishing, just like the online dating, like reduces you to a type, one type. Like people really want to fit you into one box, and
Mhm.
that is the box in which you are. Then that's how they understand you, and I find that to be extremely limiting on both fronts. So I'm hoping through my publishing journey, through my dating journey, that there are ways to look at the product in its totality, and to see multidimensionality as something that is rich and interesting. As an author, I also am, it also has a travel writing element. I'm also a woman of color. I'm also this. I'm also that. Well, okay, I'm a lot of things. Would you like me to pick one? No, I won't pick just one because I do bring all of those things. I bring an aid worker narrative, humanitarian aid. I bring a perspective on international policy. I bring, a women's rights angle. It's very much a feminist book, but it's also really personal. It's about my own. Great. Let it be all those things. And let no one tell you that you can't be all those things or do all those things or write all those things. I think that's part of what I'm kind of pushing back against. And so I think, the right person is going to understand how to celebrate and honor and eventually market all of those aspects of the story, because I think they all contribute to it being as rich and robust as it is. So let it be those things, and let us find a shelf or let us build a different shelf.
Absolutely. Listener, we're going to have a link to all of Lena's socials, her blog, any ways to keep in touch with her as she continues through this process. If you enjoyed this video or podcast episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And Lena, I just have one final question. Do you have any words of wisdom you want to leave either for your past self or for fellow writers who may be earlier on in the process than you're at now? Any words of wisdom to leave us with today?
I think it's the idea of keeping in mind why you want it and asking yourself if you still want it. And also recognizing that if you don't at some point in the journey, that it's okay to let it go. Let it go with kindness and love, and that's perfectly fine. But if you can sit down with yourself and ask if you want it and why, and that sounds like the right reason to you, then do what seems like the logical next step, and then the next one, and then the next one. And I think that's kind of how we get there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all the laughs. Thank you for just sharing your journey with us. And I'm rooting for you. I can't wait to see your book on the shelf, and I can't wait to see what shelf it ends up on. So let's
Me
go.
too. I'm just going to be standing there holding it up for lack of better shelf. Let me be your shelf.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.